to government money. And listen, I try to find agreement where I can. So I am going to say that I absolutely do agree with that statement to a certain extent, because there is a nonprofit by the name of the Heritage Foundation. And last time I checked, the Heritage Foundation, they are the authors of Project 2025. And we are living through the hell of Project 2025 right now. And
what if your grandmother's meals were canceled so a think tank could get richer? That's not hyperbole. That's federal math in 2025. In a budget hearing where millions are allocated in silence, one line item slips by without protest. Senior Nutrition Program. $0. But Representative Jasmine Crockett wasn't silent. She walked into that hearing with a folder not just full of documents, but of evidence. Evidence that America's money isn't being spent to help people, it's being spent to erase them. And the most chilling part, the government just handed $8.2 million to an organization writing the blueprint to dismantle that same government, one department, one child, one meal at a time. Stay with us, because what Jasmine reveals in the next 5 minutes may be the most devastating proof yet that fiscal responsibility has become code for engineered cruelty. The committee room exists in that peculiar washed-in twilight fluorescent lights, casting harsh shadows across mahogany tables where democracy performs its daily theater of measured cruelty. On the wall-mounted screen budget line, items cascade like digital rain. Each entry a small death certificate for someone's hope. The projector hums. Numbers march across the display with algorithmic precision. Department of Health and Human Services Community Development, Block Grants Emergency Food Assistance. Each line item carries a clinical designation, bureaucratic code names for human survival. Then comes the final entry sliding into view with the weight of inevitability. Senior Nutrition Program. FY 2024, allocation 0.20. A red line strikes through it. Digital genocide in Times New Roman font. Representative Jasmine Crockett enters the frame from the periphery, her presence cutting through the institutional beige like a blade. She carries a manila folder thick with documents, the kind of paper trail that transforms political theater into documentary evidence. The folder bears a label handwritten in block letters, Eliminated Programs, FY 2024. She places it on the witness table with deliberate precision. The sound echoes in the chamber, a gavel made of paper calling this session to its true order. The camera holds on the folder. Inside those pages live the blueprints of abandonment meal programs that fed 10,000 seniors monthly, now reduced to archive policy. Shelter networks that housed families through winter storms, now existing only in the past tense. Community health clinics that treated diabetes and despair in equal measure, their doors closing like eyelids on a dying face. This is how a nation decides who deserves to live in committee rooms where hunger becomes a line item, where human dignity gets a budget code, where survival itself must justify its existence to men in suits who have never known a single hungry night. The screen flickers. New slides load with the mechanical rhythm of a funeral procession. Representative Lauren Boebert approaches the podium with the confidence of someone who has never doubted her right to speak for others. Her heels click against marble floors in a staccato rhythm that sounds like small hammers building coffins for the program she's about to bury. Behind her, the presentation screen illuminates with stark red lettering, Radical Spending Alert. The words pulse, like a warning beacon, casting crimson shadows across the assembled faces. Below the alert photographs appear a women's shelter in Denver, its facade modest and weathered. An elderly man receiving a meal at a community center, his hands shaking as he lifts a spoon to his mouth. A child care center where single mothers leave their babies while they work minimum wage jobs that will never pay enough to escape the gravitational pull of poverty. These so-called nonprofits. Boebert begins her voice carrying the particular authority of someone who has never needed their services, have become addicted to federal funding for their woke services. The camera doesn't follow her words. Instead, it finds the faces in the gallery witnesses who have come to defend programs that keep them alive. Their expressions don't change as they absorb the casual cruelty of being labeled radical for the crime of requiring food, shelter, medical care. Their stillness becomes a form of resistance, a refusal to perform the outrage that might justify further punishment. An elderly woman in the front row clutches a photograph her grandson, she had planned to tell the committee, benefits from the after-school nutrition program. The same program now branded with scarlet letters on the screen behind Boebert's head. The woman's fingers tighten around the photo's edges, small white crescents appearing where her nails press into the paper. The slides advance with automated precision, each image labeled with clinical detachment, Dependency Creation Center, Welfare Enablement Facility, Radical Social Engineering Site. The language transforms human need into ideological warfare, converts survival into political deviance. A community health clinic appears on screen, its parking lot filled with cars bearing license plates from 3 counties, people driving hours for affordable insulin cancer screenings, prenatal care. The red stamp appears across its image, non-essential expenditure. Boebert's presentation continues each slide a small assassination of empathy. The words personal responsibility and taxpayer accountability fill the air like incense at a funeral for the social contract. But the camera lingers not on her performance, but on the bureaucratic machinery that makes such performances possible, the spreadsheets that reduce human lives to cost-benefit analyses, the committee schedules that can vote entire communities out of existence between lunch and dinner. The final slide of her presentation appears, fiscal responsibility requires difficult choices. The difficult choices, it seems, always fall on those who have no choice at all. Crockett rises with the measured pace of someone carrying evidence that will detonate. From beneath the witness table, she retrieves a presentation board large enough to command the room's attention, the kind of visual aid that transforms testimony into revelation. She unfolds it with ceremonial care. The board displays a chart titled Funding Imbalance FY 2024 in letters bold enough to be read from the gallery. The visual is stark binary, devastating in its simplicity. On the left side, 3 entries in diminishing font size, each struck through with red lines. Senior Nutrition Centers, $450,000 eliminated. Domestic violence shelters, $320,000 eliminated. Homeless youth services, $150,000 eliminated. On the right side, a single entry highlighted in gold. Heritage Foundation, Strategic Planning, Grant, $8,200,000, approved. The numbers hang in the air like an indictment. The mathematics of national priorities laid bare in a format so simple a child could understand it so damning that adults sitting in judgment must look away. Crockett's finger traces the red lines, each gesture a small funeral for programs that measured their success in lives saved rather than influence purchased. Her voice cuts through the chamber like a scalpel through hypocrisy. 3 community programs serving our most vulnerable populations. Total annual cost $920. Status eliminated for being too expensive. She moves her finger to the right side of the chart. 1 think tank. Annual federal grant $8.2 million. Status protected as essential. A new slide appears on the wall screen, materialized as if by her will. Budget Mathematics 3 Shelters. 920K. Cut Heritage. 8.2. Protected. The equation hangs in the fluorescent light like algebra of cruelty. In the gallery, calculators emerge from purses and briefcases as witnesses perform their own arithmetic, dividing Heritage's budget by the number of meals that money could have purchased the nights of shelter. It could have provided the prescription medications. It could have subsidized. The result is always the same. One organization's strategic planning costs more than feeding, housing, and healing thousands of Americans combined. Crockett lets the silence build, allows the numbers to settle into the consciousness of everyone present. This is not debate, this is accounting. Not opinion, but audit. The federal budget, as moral document revealing in spreadsheet clarity which lives the government considers worth preserving. The camera pulls back to capture the entire chart, then slowly zooms to the golden highlight around Heritage's funding. $8.2 million. Enough to operate all 3 eliminated programs for nearly 9 years. Enough to ensure that no senior citizen in 3 counties would go hungry, that no woman fleeing violence would be turned away from shelter, that no teenager would sleep in a car because their parents discovered they were gay. Instead, that money flows to an organization dedicated to dismantling the very government programs that might someday help them. The moral mathematics are undeniable. The only question remaining is whether anyone in power will be brave enough to solve for X. A new slide materializes on the screen with the weight of revelation. Project 2025, a plan to dismantle government. The title appears in institutional font, the kind of typeface used for legislation and execution orders for documents that reshape nations while maintaining the illusion of bureaucratic normalcy. The camera slowly zooms into the subtitle, each word growing larger until it fills the frame, Author, the Heritage Foundation. The connection crystallizes like a chemical reaction viewed under microscope. The organization receiving $8 million in taxpayer funding has authored a blueprint for eliminating the taxpayer's government. Federal money financing federal suicide. Democracy funding its own execution. A subsequent slide reveals the plan's architecture. Phase 1, eliminate. Department of Education, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Labor, Environmental Protection Agency. Each department name appears with clinical precision as if the plan's authors were merely reorganizing office space rather than eradicating the institutional infrastructure that keeps 40 million children fed through school lunch programs, that monitors the safety of drinking water, that ensures workers can't be fired for reporting sexual harassment. The visual cuts away from the committee room to images that exist in parallel time, a montage of American infrastructure that most citizens never consider until it disappears. EPA scientists testing river water where children swim. Labor Department investigators documenting wage theft at construction sites. Health Department epidemiologists tracking disease outbreaks before they become pandemics. Education Department administrators ensuring disabled children receive the services that law guarantees them. All of this, the unsexy, essential machinery of civilization, marked for elimination by people who have never needed any of it. The camera returns to the Heritage Foundation's headquarters, a building that glows with evening light, its windows revealing figures bent over computers writing the obituary of the American state. These are not revolutionaries storming barricades. They are bureaucrats in business, casual deconstructing democracy through Microsoft Word documents and PowerPoint presentations. Meanwhile, across the city, the shelter that lost its funding stands in darkness. A handwritten sign taped to its door reads, "Temporarily closed, seeking alternative funding." The temporarily has been there for 6 months. Below it, someone has added in different handwriting, "The poor will always be with you, but apparently not here." An elderly woman approaches the darkened building, reads the sign, then sits on the front steps. She opens a paper bag containing a single sandwich, her dinner now that the senior center is closed, and breaks it in half. She wraps one half carefully and places it beside the door in case someone hungrier finds it. This is the Heritage Foundation's America in miniature private charity trying to fill the crater left by strategic government elimination, individual kindness, attempting to compensate for institutional cruelty, love, laboring against the mathematics of abandonment. The final image of this sequence shows both buildings simultaneously, Heritage Foundation blazing with activity, and Budget the Shelter dark and defunded. The split screen reveals the true allocation of American resources, millions to destroy, nothing to nurture. A new slide appears over this visual. They call it strategy. We call it starvation. The committee room is transformed into something resembling a courtroom where the jury is the American people and the verdict is the soul of democracy itself. The fluorescent lights seem harsher now, casting shadows that look like prison bars across the faces of representatives who must decide whether a nation that funds its own destruction deserves to survive. Crockett approaches the presentation screen for the final time. Her movement carries the weight of summation of closing argument of last testimony before execution. She advances a single slide that appears with the stark simplicity of mathematical proof. Feeds 500 kids. Radical. Rights plan to fire 50,000. Respected. The equation hangs in the air like a theorem that once proven cannot be disproven. The moral mathematics are unassailable. Providing lunch to children is extremism, while eliminating the jobs of 50,000 federal employees is governance. Keeping families housed is radical ideology, while writing blueprints for dismantling the departments that inspect food safety is respectable policy analysis. The camera begins a slow retreat from the slide, pulling back to reveal the entire theater of this revelation. Representative Boebert's nameplate becomes visible in the frame, the letters of her name now appearing like an indictment rather than identification. She sits motionless, perhaps calculating the political cost of defending the indefensible, perhaps realizing that some mathematical truths transcend partisan loyalty. The pullback continues, encompassing Crockett as she places the manila folder back on the witness table. The gesture carries finality, evidence submitted, case closed, jury dismissed to deliberate in the court of public opinion. Her hands rest briefly on the folder, fingers spread like someone blessing a grave or claiming territory for truth. No one speaks. The silence expands to fill the chamber, then seep through television screens into living rooms across America, where citizens perform their own calculations. How many meals could $8 million provide? How many children could receive tutoring? How many seniors could afford their medications? How many families could keep their homes? The answers arrive like artillery shells exploding in consciousness. $8 million could feed 5,000 families for a year, could provide health insurance for 2,000 children, could fund job training for 10,000 unemployed workers, could finance housing assistance for 3,000 families facing eviction. Instead, it finances the intellectual architecture for eliminating all such programs permanently. The camera's final movement is a slow fade from the committee room to black, but words appear in white against the darkness, not credits, but epitaph. A nation that funds ideas to destroy itself while defunding care for its people is no longer a republic. It's a suicide pact. The words linger long enough for complete absorption, then fade, leaving only darkness and the weight of recognition. This is how democracies die, not through violent revolution, but through budget reconciliation. Not with bombs and bullets, but with spreadsheets and strategic plans. Not through foreign invasion, but through domestic abandonment. The radical equation has been solved, the variable isolated, the answer clear. In America, caring for the vulnerable is extremism. Planning the destruction of government is moderation. Feeding children is dangerous ideology. Firing teachers is sound fiscal policy. The mathematics of American morality laid bare in fluorescent light. The equation balances perfectly, as all true equations must. And in that balance, the Republic discovers what it has always known but never admitted. A nation's budget is its biography, its priorities, its prayer, its expenditures, its ethics made manifest in dollars and cents. The Heritage Foundation has written America's autobiography. The last chapter is titled Demolition. But somewhere in the darkness beyond the committee room, the elderly woman still sits by the closed shelter, her half sandwich still waiting beside the door for someone who needs it more than she does. That sandwich, that small act of defiance against the mathematics of cruelty, may be the most radical thing in America. And perhaps in the end, the most necessary.